In Syria, the army reinforced defense lines in Aleppo and Idlib following the incursion of terrorist militants. In Iceland, early parliamentary elections continued following the dissolution of the governing coalition and amid snowstorm warnings in several regions of the country. And in Venezuela, the people, along with the army and the police, joined forces in a nationwide drill to defend the homeland. Hello, welcome from the south. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. With the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in place, the Lebanese authorities are now turning their attention to rebuilding the areas most affected by the war. Lebanese officials, led by interim Prime Minister Najib Mikati, are expected to visit Gulf countries to seek funding for reconstruction. The World Bank estimates the damage to housing in Lebanon alone at $2 billion, with 99,000 homes partially or totally destroyed by Israel's aggression. Intense Israeli airstrikes over the past 2 months have flattened entire neighborhoods in eastern and southern Lebanon, as well as in the southern suburbs of Beirut. In Palestine, Israeli occupation forces killed 5 humanitarian workers in the southern Gaza Strip. An Israeli drone fired a vehicle belonging to the humanitarian organization World Central Bank. The car was traveling on the Salah al-Din road. Meanwhile, another attack on Friday night targeted a residential apartment in the Sheikh Rad 1 neighborhood northwest of Gaza, where at least 10 civilians were killed and others wounded. Since October 7, 2023, the Israeli army has carried out a genocidal aggression against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, claiming the lives of more than 40,000 citizens, most of them women and children. Several organizations defending the rights of Palestinian prisoners denounced the use of different methods of torture by Israel against Palestinian detainees. According to these organizations, thousands of inmates in prisons and in camps administered by the Israeli army have been facing harsh conditions since the beginning of its war against the Gaza Strip in October 2023. They also denounced the use of starvation, sexual aggression, sleep deprivation, beatings, among others, at an unprecedented level in the history of the conflict. Moreover, Israeli forces prevent torture victim prisoners from having access to medical treatment. Since the beginning of the new phase of violence, at least 45 Palestinian prisoners have died in Israeli prisons. The United Nations Children's Fund and the World Health Organization have reiterated the urgency for ceasefire in Gaza on humanitarian grounds. Representatives of these two international organizations warned that 90% of the population in the Gaza Strip is living in tents, which leaves them vulnerable to respiratory and other diseases, food insecurity, and malnutrition. The agencies further noted that while there is an urgent need for Israel to allow humanitarian aid to enter the enclave to meet the basic and urgent needs of the Gazan population, this does not constitute a definitive solution to their suffering. The UN officials also reiterated the urgency of a ceasefire to work towards peace. And the Syrian army reinforced the lines of defense in the cities of Aleppo and Idlib following the incursion of terrorist militants. In a statement, the general commander of the army and the Syrian armed forces said the move comes after terrorist organizations launched a large-scale attack from multiple directions on the Aleppo and Idlib fronts. They also stated that the measure is temporary and is only aimed at protecting civilian and military lives, as well as preparing for a counterattack. The military special forces in Damascus ratified their commitment to fulfill their national duty in the fight against armed groups and to restore the control of the state. For their part, Russian armed forces aircraft support the Syrian counteroffensive and shelled the positions of the illegal armed groups. According to the Russian Center for Reconciliation of the Enemy Parties in Syria, Russian troops eliminated no less than 200 terrorists. The Russian entity stressed that the anti-terrorist operations continue. And in Brazil, citizens carried out activities in the city of Sao Paulo in the framework of their International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. The event took place at the Palestinian bar and restaurant Al Jania. which can also be described as a cultural center and entertainment space. During the meeting, participants held discussions on the situation in the Gaza Strip and expressed their rejection of the Israeli genocide that has already claimed the lives of more than 44,000 civilians. The event also included exhibitions of documentaries and political actions. This event responds to a call of the Palestinian resistance to celebrate the 30th of November and the 1st of December as World Days of the Palestinian struggle and the Palestinian people.
It is very important to remember all the massacres that Israel is committing against the Palestinian people. It is important to remember that the Palestinian resistance called for November 30th and December 1st as World Days of the Palestinian struggle and for the Palestinian people. Today, this Brazilian cultural and political center is doing this event, so that the people of Brazil understand more about what is happening in Palestine, and so that we, as Palestinian refugees in this country, feel that we are not alone.
What we are seeing is the worst thing that can happen to humanity. Humanity lost all the wealth it had to commit genocide in the 21st century. Children, women, destruction, it is absurd, it is the worst of people.
Now we have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back, stay with us. Welcome back. In Iceland, early parliamentary elections were underway following the dissolution of the governing coalition. Polling stations opened early in the morning. Nearly 270,000 citizens were called to the polls to choose 63 members of the Icelandic parliament. Political parties need at least 5% of the vote to gain representation in the parliament. This election takes place in the midst of a yellow alert decree in different areas due to snowstorms in the country. Polling stations will remain open until 10 p.m. local time, and the results are expected to be announced this Sunday morning if bad weather does not postpone the voting in certain constituencies. In Kosovo, a canal supplying water to two coal power plants that generate nearly all of the country's electricity was damaged in an explosion this past Friday, November 29th. Kosovo's Prime Minister Albin Kurti said the explosion was a terrorist attack by neighboring Serbia. He also announced police already made several arrests regarding the incident, which occurred near the town of Subin Potok in the north, some 16 kilometers from the border area with Serbia. The explosion cut the flow of water for the plant's cooling systems, prompting fears that much of the country could be left without electricity by the weekend. For his part, Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić denied the accusation, saying it was irresponsible and baseless. The Serbian president condemned the blast as an action that threatens the fragile stability they are striving to maintain. And according to Georgia's Ministry of Interior, more than 100 people were detained during an opposition rally outside Parliament Tbilisi on Friday night. A report said the arrests were made on charges of vandalism or disobeying police orders. Protesters began gathering outside the Parliament building in Tbilisi last Thursday after the country's Prime Minister Irakli Kobizis suspended negotiations with the European Union over Georgia's membership of the regional bloc until 2028. The country's President Salome Zurabishvili joined the demonstrators last night, who attacked police officers with blunt objects. Russian armed forces carried out attacks on Ukrainian military airfields and energy facilities in charge of operation of the country's military-industrial complex. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, operational tactical aviation, unmanned aerial attack vehicles, missile troops, and artillery troops groupings of the armed forces of the Russian Federation attacked the infrastructure of military airfields and energy facilities that ensure the functioning of the Ukrainian military-industrial complex. The ministry detailed that the concentrations of Ukrainian troops and war equipment in 132 areas were also attacked. And in India, on Saturday, meteorologists reported rainfall and strong winds associated with tropical storm Bengal, which caused flooding in several regions of the country. According to the report, the hardest hit areas are the Tamil Nadu and Puducherry regions with overflowing rivers, fallen trees, and infrastructure damage. The government has deployed some 22,000 troops, including engineers, law enforcement, and health workers, to deal with the emergency. It also set up shelters for affected families and started water drainage using over 1,686 pumps. And in Uganda, the death toll from landslides caused by heavy rains has risen to 20. According to the Ugandan Red Cross, the bodies of 4 more people were found on Friday, whereas a 5th injured person died at the clinic where he was hospitalized. Local authorities report that firefighters and soldiers have been deployed to the affected areas to help with the excavation and removal of the bodies that remain on the mud. Heavy rains triggered landslides that affected 6 villages in the mountain district of Bulampuli, 280 kilometers east of Kampala, Uganda's capital, leaving about 125 houses destroyed and 750 people displaced. And the 21st edition of the Marrakesh International Film Festival begins on Friday evening in Morocco without a red carpet due to the conflicts in the Middle East. The gala was attended by stars such as David Cronenberg, Tim Burton, Monica Bellucci, and Luca Guadagnino. This year, the festival will be chaired by Italian Luca Guadagnino. Furthermore, its members will choose the best among 14 films that are first or second feature films by new directors from countries such as Japan, Palestine, Egypt, Myanmar, Argentina, and Poland. The exhibition titled Cartas para Mañana by Cuban visual artist Sergio Marrero and Reynaldo Cid opened on Friday at the Galeano Gallery in Havana. In this event, it was exhibited as a suggestive sample based on drawing and everyday objects. According to the artist, this bipersonal collection takes as a reference the Baroque and fantastic virtuality of the old cabinets of curiosity exhibited in Cuba during the 16th to the 18th century. Cid explained that his show is about new ways of assuming the process of photography. This exhibition was organized as a collateral project to the 15th Havana Biennial, which is being held in the Cuban capital until February 28th. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date with the world's most recent events. Found your break, don't go away. Welcome back. In Argentina, the administration of President Javier Milei has stopped supplying soup kitchens, worsening food insecurity for the most vulnerable. The Excluded Workers Movement has described the situation facing soup kitchens as distressing, for they lack the resources to self-supply those centers which scores of people depend on. In 2023, soup kitchens functioned with food donated by the government, but with the Milei administration, donations stopped. Several social organizations that seek to help families face the onslaught of Milei's policies are confronted with a lack of state policies to support the most vulnerable sectors and with growing food inequality. In Venezuela, the people, along with the army and the police, joined forces in a nationwide drill to defend the homeland. In what's called a civic-military police union, drill participants were deployed nationwide for the defense of the country's sovereignty. In the states of La Guaira, Trujillo, and Caracas, among others, this joint force was mobilized to prompt its response capacity to any situation that may threaten stability and order in the country. Their task is to secure institutions and the Venezuelan people itself. And in Cuba, humanitarian aid from Venezuela was delivered at the Mariel port in a gesture of solidarity that has always characterized bilateral relations between the two nations. In this context, 200 tons of construction supplies were received, aiming at assisting the communities. In addition, Donations from Venezuelan private entrepreneurs were also sent to help due to the recent climate events. The reception was attended by the Vice Minister of Domestic Trade, Aracelis Cardoso Hernandez, representatives of the Ministry of Foreign Trade and officials of the Embassy of Venezuela in Cuba, and it was emphasized that the union of the peoples is the only means to overcome adversities. And November 30th marks the beginning in Seattle, United States, of the anti-globalization movement, after 50,000 demonstrators prevented in the year 1999 the opening ceremony of the WTO summit from taking place. The worldwide anti-globalization movement is characterized by its rejection of the neoliberal capitalist model and the demand for social justice. It includes environmentalists, feminists, anarchists, Christians, former communists, defenders of human rights, and others. Their main strategy consists of taking advantage of the meetings of the most important multilateral organizations to call for massive parallel demonstrations, as they did with great echo in Seattle, Washington, and Prague. The final of the Copa Libertadores 2024, which will define the champion of the continental competition, will have Atlético Mineiro facing Botafogo this Saturday at Monumental Stadium in Buenos Aires, Argentina. In the event of a tie during the game, a 30-minute extra time will be played, and if the tie remains, there will be a penalty shootout. It's worth mentioning that Atlético Mineiro reaches the final after winning its only title in 2013, led by Ronaldinho. Botafogo, on the other hand, is entering the decisive match in the Continental Tournament for the first time. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. Join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thanks for watching.